Good morning. Have you ever joined a video conference and wondered how to be a better participant, how to use good lighting, how to have good audio, or in general, how to be a good video conferencing participant? Well, if you've ever asked yourself that question, this is the presentation for you. My name is Jason Mobley, also known as the UC Guru. So I am also the executive director of IT for Florida A&M University. I do a lot of Zoom video reviews and somewhat of a Zoom evangelist online. And I'm happy to present this to you today. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the UC Guru's top 25 tips or best practices as a video conferencing participant. Topics include lighting, webcams, microphones, headsets, and tools and tricks. So pro tip number one, always check your camera positioning. So right now I'm using a camera on an actual tripod because I want it at eye level. You never want your camera to be up here or down here like this. You always want it positioned at eye level. And if you don't have that, then get yourself a tripod and put your webcam on top of it. Pro tip number two, always check your internet bandwidth. You can use a simple tool like speedtest.net and make sure that your bandwidth is what you're paying for. For example, my bandwidth right now is in the 300s. My upload is about 38 meg. But some people, whether you're on cable or you're on DSL, are getting very low speed. So number one, have them check the speed to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. Number two, if what you're paying for is not fast enough, upgrade your bandwidth because you want a good experience. You never want your video choppy and you do not want your audio laggy. Pro tip number three, restart your router, modem, and computer on a regular basis. For example, on the router, I would do that weekly. Whether you have a cable modem router combo or you have two separate units, always reboot those once a week. On the computer, I always reboot my computer in the morning about 15 minutes before I actually have the presentation. And that should suffice on any type of delays that you may see. Pro tip number five, and one of the most important tips, is to make sure that you have a good camera. Now, the cameras that come with laptops are typically not sufficient. I have a MacBook Pro, and even trying to use that camera, I noticed the lighting's bad, the quality of the camera is not sharp. So what I would recommend is one of two cameras. Logitech is known for their cameras, right? And the Logitech C930 retails for about $129 online, or the Logitech Brio, which is the one that I'm using here, MSRP is for about $199, and they're 1080 and 4K respectively. Pro tip number six, and this is kind of a newer feature, is use a DSLR camera as your webcam. So for example, the Canon EOS M5 or M50, MSRP is for about $599. The small rig that I'm using actually here is about $39, but these cameras produce a quality that's unparalleled to any webcam out there on the market today. And they actually have the EOS webcam utility that allows you to use the webcam via USB on your computer. Pro tip number seven, upgrade your microphone. On the PCs, the built-in microphones are typically horrible. They have a lot of echo, a lot of reverberation. The two microphones that I suggest, the Blue Yeti, which retails for about $129, or the one that I'm using is the Plantronics Callisto 7200, which MSRP is for about $200, but it also has a feature called noise block, and you don't actually see these microphones on camera. Mine's actually sitting right here, and as you can see, but I can put it on the table. And what I like about this microphone too is I can mute and unmute from the microphone, and the sound is much clearer and crisp than using the built-in microphones. Pro tip number eight, use a virtual background. This is a new feature to Zoom and Teams. I actually saw the other day that WebEx actually has virtual backgrounds as well, but use virtual backgrounds if you don't like your actual background. And again, I've entered a link here for virtual backgrounds that you can download a host of amazing virtual backgrounds. Now, some computers are not fast enough to support the virtual background technology. And if you do have that type of computer, then you need to use a green screen. Now, the one that I recommend is the WebAround. You can purchase one at thewebaround.com, and they MSRP for about $50 or $60. They come in a nice little bag like this, and it's portable, it collapses, and it actually fits on the back of your chair. Pro tip number 10, you need to adjust your lighting. Now, again, backlighting is absolutely should be avoided. I've seen a lot of videos where people are have an open window behind them. It makes you look like a halo, or that you're in witness protection, as we see in the picture on the right here. So always avoid backlighting, and you always want front lighting. So again, I have the light coming to the front, and also always avoid lighting directly overhead because that has a very weird reflection effect. Now again, some lighting tips. I'm using the Lume Cube. Again, MSRP is for about $69, and this affixes to the top of your laptop or even the top of your monitor. It's a great feature, and it doesn't cost a lot. Also, the popular tool that a lot of people are doing, and they're getting this on Amazon, is ring lights. Ring lights typically are about $60 to $100, depending on which one you use. And the ring light can go directly behind your monitor, and it's height adjustable. It even works with a iPhone or an Android. Now, pro tip number 12, turn off uploads of important meetings. So Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, and OneDrive, all of those consume bandwidth while you're on these meetings. Pause the uploads while you're on the meeting. That way you consume all your bandwidth, because these file backup services can rob important needed bandwidth. Pro tip number 13, and it's something that I see all the time, and I think it's actually quite offensive. Never point at the camera. Never do this, right? When you're speaking, you're always good to use your hands, but don't point at the screen, because some people do feel that it can be disrespectful or offensive. Pro tip number 14, turn off notifications. Whether you're Mac or PC, as you can see that I listed here, you can turn off the notifications either in system preferences or in your Windows settings, because no one wants to hear all these dings and emails and things coming in while you're on a call. So make sure you turn those off. And even on the cell phone, turn your cell phone to vibrate so that it doesn't make noise while you're on a meeting. Pro tip number 15, always record your meetings when needed. Now, there are two choices on the recordings. You can either record them on the local computer in the cloud. Now, I base that decision on a couple of things. If I am going to edit the video, for example, I do a lot of YouTube reviews. So when I edit that video, I'm always going to do on the local computer because the quality is somewhat better. Now, if I'm not going to edit the video, I'm always going to record to the cloud because, again, Zoom gives you a shareable link that I can forward out to other people. And another add-on tool that I think is quite excellent, and you can get this in the Zoom Marketplace, is Otter.ai. Now, what Otter.ai does is it integrates with your meeting, and as you record the meeting, it's transcribing the meeting into the platform. You get an email when it's done. It also tells you who the speakers are, and it gives you a transcription that you can send out to your meeting participants after. I use the Otter.ai on every meeting that I use. I have no relationship with this company whatsoever, but it simply works. Now, pro tip number 16, declutter your background. As we can see on the image on the right, it's just a mess, right? I think it might be off of an episode of Hoarders, but you don't want your background to be messy. So clean it up, use a virtual background, or try to look like the gentleman on the left where you're nice and neat in the background. Because at the end of the day, what you truly want is to be brand representative of your business. Now, pro tip number 17. You want to use AI tools to quiet background noise. And one that I actually have tested and you really like is Crisp.ai. What this does is It eliminates dogs barking, babies crying, airplanes flying over, and you never hear that on the meeting. And it's simply a plug-in that works with your microphone and fixes those background noises out. Now, again, they do have a free trial tool. It is limited to 120 minutes per week. But if you decide to upgrade to a pro account, again, very inexpensive to use, and it is unlimited. Pro tip number 18, always dress for success. The one thing that I always tell people is dress like you would dress in the office. Just because we're at home, you do want to be comfortable, especially from the waist up. But as we can see in the picture here, this gentleman actually has his pajamas on. That's okay, but from the waist up, we want to be brand representative. So I typically suggest don't wear casual wear unless you're wearing a t-shirt that has your company brand on it and it's acceptable with your boss. Pro tip number 19, make sure that you stay muted when you're not talking. One thing that's very distracting in a meeting is someone forgets to mute and they're having a side conversation, they're banging on the desk and using the keyboard and typing the whole time. That can be very distracting. So again, stay muted the entire time that you're not speaking. And a actual Zoom tip and a shortcut is when you want to talk, press the keyboard and it will unmute you, hold it down, and when you're done talking, let the keyboard go. So again, prevent disrupting noise when you're not speaking. Pro tip number 20. So again, I mentioned using the microphone, but there are die-hard headphone or headset users out there. If you are a headset user, the advantages is if you have multiple people in your home and you don't want it to be loud and noisy, you can use a headset to cut down the noise. Now, two headsets that I recommend, and Poly makes great headsets, is the Poly Focus UC, which retails for $199, or the Poly Voyager 6200, which retails for the same price. Now, I have both of these headsets. What I like about the Focus UC is it does have a boom microphone. It is Bluetooth. I can pair it with my phone and computer at the same time, so I can use it for phone calls as well. And the same thing with the Voyager Focus. Now, again, if you're like me and you have beautiful hair and you don't want it over your head, you can use the Poly Voyager 6200, which again is an in-ear type of microphone. Now, pro tip number 21. You want to use wired over wireless if you can. Now, I get not every situation you have a direct connection to your router or your switch, and you don't have the ability because maybe you're downstairs and you can't get that wired. But if you can, always plug into your switch versus using Wi-Fi because it will help prevent auto lag and video disruptions. So when I first started working from home, of course, I was on Wi-Fi, and I noticed there were certain times of the day where my quality wasn't the best. When I plugged in, it fixed all of that. So again, plug in when you can. Pro tip number 22, always be timely to your meetings. Never come in late. Actually, of course, being on time probably is being late, right? So I recommend being about 5 minutes early and make sure that you end on time. Because one thing that is disrupting to meetings is not being on mute, coming in late, and you hearing noise bringing in while someone's presenting. So make sure that you arrive on time and that you end on time. Pro tip number 23, don't be like this guy here and eat on camera. I get working from home, there's a lot of times where we're eating lunch at our desk, and sometimes we have back-to-back meetings. If you do have to eat, turn your camera off, keep your mic muted, and then when someone talks to you, unmute your microphone, but you don't want to be chowing down on camera if at all possible, because sometimes people even consider that disrespectful on meetings. Pro tip number 24, always keep your camera on. I get that there's a lot of people that have bad hair days like I do, but again, try to stay on camera. That is the power of video. We can see each other. We can hear the tone and feel the inflection. There's a lot of nonverbals that go on during a meeting, but if you have your camera on, you're not going to be experiencing any of those. Again, the only time I'm going to turn my camera on is if I'm stepping away for a restroom break, or again, like I mentioned before, if I do have to eat. Because the one thing that you want to avoid is the talking head syndrome. You don't want to be talking with your camera off and we just see your picture. I don't think that is as professional as we could be. So try to embrace the power of video. And lastly, pro tip number 25, always stay engaged. Because engaging with your host will make the meeting more memorable. You want to make sure that you participate in polls, use your raised hand feature, and again, use meeting reactions as nonverbal cues. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Again, my name is Jason, the UC Guru. So check me out on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to connect. Everyone have a blessed day and stay safe.